They summoned me at 2:15 p.m. No prior notice, no calendar invite. Just a knock on my cubicle wall and a curt, "HR needs to see you for a moment." I assumed it was my annual performance review since today marked my 21st work anniversary. I even wore navy, the same blazer I had on the day I was promoted to senior compliance officer 10 years ago. When I entered the room, Mitchell was already seated, his expression blank. His hands were clasped on the table, elbows resting like he was bracing for a deposition. Across from him sat Hannah from HR, eyes locked on a folder she hadn't opened yet. "Grace," Mitchell began, his voice cold and devoid of warmth. "This isn't easy, but the company is entering a lean restructuring phase. Your benefits package? It's too costly to maintain." I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry?" He stared right at me and then dropped the sentence that haunted me for months. "Your insurance costs us $720 a month. That's unsustainable." I waited for some kind of explanation or acknowledgement. There was none. No mention of my spotless record. No recognition that I'd been here longer than anyone else on the floor. Just numbers. A folder slid across the table, containing a standard severance offer, 2 weeks' pay, and an NDA. It didn't fully sink in until I returned to my desk. I hadn't even been asked to train my replacement. They didn't need one. My duties were being split among junior hires at half the salary, none of whom had ever handled a regulatory audit. I packed my belongings silently, no tears, no words. I placed my Compliance Queen coffee mug carefully into the box and tried to steady my breath through the tightness in my chest. Then, my phone buzzed with a company-wide automated email. "Congratulations to Grace Thompson on 21 incredible years at Ulm Solutions. We thank her for her dedication, passion, and integrity." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then deleted it as I headed for the elevator. I passed Jason, the new guy in data operations, who'd started just last week. I had covered for a massive compliance error he'd made. "He got a promotion. Still here?" He grinned. But I didn't answer. They kept him for his energy. They called it fresh blood. According to Mitchell, integrity was simply too expensive. Hannah from HR told me I had 30 minutes to be gone, as if 2 decades of service could be erased between lunch and an afternoon meeting. She handed me a cardboard box, avoided eye contact, and mumbled something about deactivating my credentials. I walked back to my desk feeling like a ghost. Nobody asked what happened. Everyone knew, or worse, pretended not to. The office suddenly felt alien. My name was still on the glass wall outside compliance, but it was just decorative, a placeholder nobody bothered to remove. The printer still churned out reports I'd coded. My chair still had the lumbar support pad I brought from home, but I already felt like I didn't belong. I began packing my framed photo of my son's graduation, the plant I had stubbornly kept alive even when I couldn't take care of myself, and the mug they gave me at the 15-year mark. Still here, still holding on. The irony stung. People passed by my desk, but no one stopped. Not even Linda, who used to have lunch with me every Tuesday. She glanced over with wide eyes and then quickened her pace. I understood. Guilt moves faster than sympathy in corporate hallways. I took one last look around before stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, I heard a soft beep, then silence. I tried swiping my badge again. Nothing. The elevator wouldn't respond. I had to ask a passerby to press the ground floor button. They did so without a word, as if I was already forgotten, already irrelevant. By the time the doors shut, waves of grief hit me. Hot, nauseating, thick in my throat. I blinked hard. I would not cry in that elevator. I wouldn't give them that downstairs. I sat on a bench near the lobby to compose myself. The marble floors and corporate art looked exactly the same, but everything felt warped and distant, like I was seeing it all through a one-way mirror. That's when I spotted it, tucked between folders at the bottom of my box. A printed email I didn't recognize at first, not addressed to me. Unfolding it, I saw the header. To MSP Spencer CEO, from D. Lawson Legal. Subject: Compliance Review Flagged Risk. Attachment: Internal policy deviation flagged by G.T. Thompson. The message was brief, but struck like a slap. Her warning puts us at risk. Get her out before this escalates, Mitchell. My breath caught. This wasn't about $720 a month, or budget cuts, or restructuring. They got rid of me because I saw something they didn't want anyone to see, because I spoke up. They didn't just remove me from payroll. They erased me from the system, from memory, from the story. But someone forgot to shred this one sheet of truth. I stared at the words until the paper's edges blurred, then folded it and tucked it back in the box, clutching it tighter than anything else I carried out of that building. I wasn't just fired. I was wiped away. And now I had proof. I didn't sleep that night, lying in bed with my phone's glow inches from my face, scrolling through old emails I technically shouldn't have access to. My company inbox was shut down, but I had backups. Outdated, clunky, not always synced, but still there, like bones buried in shallow soil. I wasn't searching for anything specific. At least, that's what I told myself, deep down. I was hoping to find something. Anything that would confirm what I already suspected. This was never about a $720 insurance premium. It was about silence, control, and fear. At 3:04 a.m., I found the thread, dated 6 weeks before I was let go. The subject line was bland. Policy Update Reimbursements Review. The message was short. Mitchell had replied to an internal proposal to quietly reduce covered medical reimbursements under our employee plan without notifying anyone directly. Employees would only realize when claims were denied. His words were sharp and efficient. If we can cut 8 to 10% off monthly payouts without triggering compliance flags, do it fast quiet. My heart pounded as I read on. Below was my own reply, which I had almost forgotten. I had flagged the risk of litigation, cited exact employee protection laws, and warned that unilateral, undisclosed changes could count as fraudulent concealment. No one responded, but someone noticed. Above my warning was the latest message, forwarded to Mitchell and legal, marked high priority. Her note is a problem. Get her out before this escalates. I sat upright in bed, the blue glow of the screen casting a cold light across my face. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked open the attachment at the bottom of the email. It was a PDF, a single page titled Cost-Saving Adjustments, Phase 3, featuring a detailed grid of reimbursement items, mental health services, post-op physical therapy, prescription copay caps, all marked with glaring red X's. These were benefits hundreds of employees depended on, now being cut without any warning. At the bottom, bold letters read, "Confidential, do not circulate outside this thread." It felt like a fire ignited deep inside my chest. They knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't an accident or a budget crisis. It was cold, calculated, and intentional. They were exploiting the trust of people who devoted their health, time, and loyalty to the company. And when I dared to speak up, even gently, they erased me. Not because I was wrong, but because I was right. I stared at the screen as anger slowly rose, like a pot on the verge of boiling over. All those faces at the office, pretending nothing was wrong, the hollow "thank you" email. The people who avoided my gaze on my final day. Maybe they didn't know, or maybe they chose comfort over conscience. Either way, I refused to delete this thread. Not this time. Mourning gave way to something sharper. Not fury, not sorrow, but focus. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used every morning before work. My laptop was open to the email thread. My phone lay face down nearby, its screen smudged from hours of scrolling. I knew what I had to do. I opened my contacts and searched for a name I hadn't thought about in years. Dana Myers. She was a corporate compliance attorney who'd audited Olmd back in 2017 when a state inspector flagged irregularities in vendor contracts. Most people hated her. She was blunt, relentless, and razor-sharp. But I respected her. She didn't flinch, didn't play favorites, and never blinked. Once, after I handed over a full documentation trail within 24 hours, she told me over lunch, "You're the cleanest operator in a dirty system." I'd laughed then, but now it felt different. I sent her a text. Dana, it's Grace Thompson, I need to talk. About 3 minutes later, she replied. I'll call you in 10. Exactly 10 minutes later, her voice came through, still crisp, measured, every word deliberate and cleared for airspace. Tell me what you've got, she said. No greetings, no small talk. I gave her the brief version. Sudden termination, flagged policy change, the email thread, the attachment. I kept my voice calm, but the coldness in hers steadied me. When I mentioned the phrase, do not circulate outside this thread, she interrupted. You have that PDF? I do, but don't send it yet. Meet me today at 3 Crows in my office. I almost forgot to breathe. That soon? She didn't hesitate. Grace, you don't realize what you're holding. It's time. Her office was in a converted brownstone in the legal district. 2 stories, no signage, high ceilings, and hardwood floors that creaked underfoot. It didn't look like a war room, but it was one. Dana stood behind a wide oak table, littered with folders, tablets, and 2 laptops. She waved me in without looking up. Coffee's on the right, sit. I did. She pulled out a folder labeled OSI, Internal Exposure. I raised an eyebrow. OSI is Olmed Solutions, Inc., she said calmly, flipping it open. I've been building this for 2 years. I stared, speechless. Why? I asked. Because, she said evenly. They've been skating the line for a decade. Former employees, client vendors, even a state employee have come to me anonymously, but no one had hard proof. Just whispers. Your file completes the circle. I swallowed hard. You were waiting for someone like me. She locked eyes with me. No, I've been waiting for you. That stopped me cold. She showed me 3 tabs on her screen. Vendor manipulation from 2020, a compliance officer from HR who quietly resigned in 2021, and a redacted internal memo from a regulatory audit review. Each piece pointed to unethical, cost-saving practices Olmed had quietly implemented over time. They were fragmented, circumstantial, until now. I've been watching, Dana said. You were the last clean signature on every policy change before they pushed you out. That tells me they knew you wouldn't approve this. So what now? I asked. Without hesitation, she said. Now we take this private gather evidence, verify it, then go public class action if we have enough people, whistleblower protection if we need it. She slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a prepaid phone and a flash drive. Don't use your cell, don't access anything from home. And Grace, her eyes narrowed, not cruel but razor sharp. If you do this, there's no unringing the bell. I looked down at the envelope and then at the PDF in my bag and nodded. Cold, clear, ready. I never imagined I'd become like a spy at 52, but that's exactly how the next few days felt. Dana's prepaid phone felt heavy in my purse, ticking like a time bomb. I only used it at the public library, where the Wi-Fi was spotty but anonymous. I parked 4 blocks away and wore sunglasses entering, not because anyone would recognize me, but because once secrecy settles in your bones, it changes how you move through the world. My first job was to catalog everything I still had. Emails, policy memos, redlined drafts of internal guidelines. Most came from backups I'd exported during my last compliance review. It had been standard procedure then, something I did instinctively to ease audit prep. I never imagined those files would become the backbone of a case that could shake Olmed to its core. Dana worked like a machine by day 3. She'd contacted 4 former employees who'd either quietly quit or been forced out after raising similar concerns. One was Marcus Taylor, who handled internal audits. I hadn't seen him since he vanished in 2020, without explanation. People whispered he'd had a breakdown. Turns out he'd been asked to revise reports to downplay irregular vendor expenses. When he refused, HR suddenly found performance issues and pushed him out with a broken contract and a ruined reputation. Marcus remembered me. You were the only one who ever asked for original source data, Marcus said during a Zoom call Dana set up. I always figured you were just too clean for that place. Another woman, Charlene Vu, a junior analyst in the risk division, showed Dana emails where she challenged patterns of denied insurance claims. 2 weeks later, she was moved to reception. They didn't fire me, she said. They just made me irrelevant. Each conversation confirmed what I'd long suspected. My firing wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern, eliminating those who noticed too much. Then came a message that changed everything. One night, Dana received an anonymous, encrypted email from someone still inside the company. The sender called themselves Black Box. The email contained a single PDF titled Internal Reimbursement Analysis Q1 2025. I'll never forget the silence on the phone as Dana scrolled through it, then finally said, "This is worse than we thought." The document spelled it out coldly. Denied claims had jumped 38% in the last quarter. Most were for medical services employees were told were covered, mental health counseling, maternity prescriptions, cancer screening follow-ups. The system was programmed to auto-reject certain codes without notifying HR or patients. No appeals, no records, just silent denials. At the bottom, a note in italics. Internal flag. Do not report denials in monthly summaries unless queried by audit. They weren't just hiding the truth, they were burying it. And someone inside was starting to dig. Dana's voice came over the line, low and steady like a match striking flame. This just became a war. I didn't flinch. I felt it too. This wasn't about me anymore. Not revenge, not reclaiming my name. It was about the hundreds still working there, trusting the company to have their backs, believing in coverage that didn't exist. I was going to be the one to pull the thread until it all unraveled. I hadn't realized how noisy paranoia could be. Every step behind me felt too close. Every unknown call twisted my stomach. Even my apartment, once a refuge, felt watched. 3 days after Dana got the black box email, I was walking back to my car after a quick grocery run, lemons in hand, when I noticed the driver's side mirror folded in. I never did that. The windows looked unusually clean, like fingerprints had been wiped away. I froze. My instincts screamed to get in and drive, but something felt off. Scanning the empty parking lot, my eyes landed on a beat-up white truck idling near the exit. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I quickly looked away, pretending not to notice. Inside my car, everything seemed normal. Radio presets, seat adjusted just right. But when I popped the trunk to load groceries, I saw my briefcase. I always kept it there, a habit from my office days. It hadn't been touched for weeks, until now the zipper was open, files slightly splayed, not missing, just disturbed. Whoever it was hadn't stolen anything. They were sending a message. I slammed the trunk shut and drove home, hands shaking on the wheel, every red light feeling like a trap. I double-locked my apartment door, checked the windows 3 times before letting myself sit that night. It escalated. At 11:28 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. No name, just a black bubble on my screen. "You don't know who you're messing with." I stared, frozen. The words weren't crude or explicit, but heavy. Like a cold fog creeping into an unsealed room, I called Dana. She picked up on the second ring. "You got something?" She asked. "No?" I said. "They're trying to shake me." I told her everything. The car, the briefcase, the text. She paused briefly. "Grace, they're trying to rattle you. If they had anything real, you'd have a lawsuit, not scare tactics." "So what do I do?" "Exactly what you've been doing. Only smarter, slower, and less alone." The next day, I changed my routine, parking in different spots, using rideshare to get to the library. Keeping my head down, sunglasses on, hoodie up, I felt like a fugitive. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting, until someone I trusted turned away. Stephanie Chang was a close colleague, another compliance analyst, sharp and principled. We'd shared lunches almost every week for 5 years. I thought she might understand. So I texted, "Hey Steph, can we talk? I just need someone to hear me out." Hours passed with no response. Finally, a single message. "Stop, this isn't worth it." Then her contact was blocked. I stared at the screen, numb. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was isolation. One by one, The people who shared coffee breaks and meetings were closing their doors, not because they disagreed, but because they were scared too. I couldn't blame them. Not everyone has the courage to stand alone in the dark, holding a match. But I wasn't backing down. Not after someone tried to open the trunk of my life. Now I knew they feared what I might uncover. Fear doesn't vanish once you speak. It just becomes the price you pay for telling the truth. By week's end, I'd changed my habits so often, I couldn't tell if I was cautious or paranoid. I stopped sitting in cafes. I carried a new prepaid phone. I even quit wearing perfume. It felt too noticeable, like scent could make me traceable, but the silence was heavier than any threat. Then Dana mentioned Kellen Grant. "He's a journalist," she said. "Long-form investigative, not sensational. Broke the Denver VA fraud case in 2019. Credible, discreet, and he'll protect your identity." My stomach clenched at the thought. Going public felt like stepping off a cliff. Talking to Dana in encrypted chats was one thing, but letting my story bleed into the world was another. "They'll know it's me," I whispered. Dana nodded. "Eventually, but not yet. We do this smart." She set up a virtual meeting. Kellen's face appeared on my laptop. Calm, mid-40s, square jaw, sleeves rolled up, like he was ready to fight with facts alone. "I understand your concerns," he said quietly, deliberately. "I never publish without triple-checking every document, and I never reveal my sources. You won't be the exception." We spent over an hour going through the timeline. My role, the flagged policy changes, the email thread, the fake approvals, and most critically, the silent denials of employee insurance claims. He listened without interrupting or dramatizing, simply taking notes and asking the kinds of questions only a seasoned journalist would think to ask. "Do you still have access to the redacted quarterly summaries?" He asked. "No," I replied. "But I'd seen the originals." "Could you recognize a doctor-redacted version?" "Without a doubt." He paused, nodded once, then said, "Then let's start with the truth." 3 days later, the article was published. It wasn't front-page breaking news, but it landed hard, like a sledgehammer. The headline read, "Senior Compliance Officer Fired After Warning of Insurance Fraud," by Kellen Grant. For the Ledger, an anonymous insider at Olmod Solutions alleged that confidential internal insurance policy changes led to the silent denial of essential health services for dozens of employees. The piece was cautious, anonymous, and masterfully written. My name wasn't mentioned, but my fingerprints were all over it. The fallout was swift. Dana's phone lit up that very afternoon. Calls from former employees, compliance watchdog groups, even a class-action law firm. People were finally paying attention. The silence was broken, but it was an email later that night that stunned me. From an anonymous Proton Mail account. No subject, no name. Just one line of text. "You're right, I can back you up, L." My heart pounded L. I rifled through old records, searching for the name behind the initial, and found it. Leonard Granger, former VP of Legal Affairs at Olmd. He'd retired suddenly the previous year, with no explanation given, always cordial, but distant, not cold. Someone who kept his ethics close and his words closer. If it was really him, everything changed. Dana verified the email header was authentic. He used end-to-end encryption. "That's not just support, that's a breadcrumb," she said. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We wait," she answered. "He reached out. That means he's watching. When he's ready, he'll send more." Part of me wanted to scream. Waiting was unbearable. But another part, the part I hadn't felt since being escorted out, began to flicker again. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just a quiet yes amid your shaking. I didn't know if Leonard would come through. But one thing was clear. I wasn't alone anymore. The wall of silence I thought would bury me was starting to crack. Then the headline changed everything on a foggy Wednesday morning. I opened my laptop to check Kellen's follow-up story, and nearly spilled my coffee. CNN had picked it up. "Whistleblower exposes internal insurance fraud at Olmd Solutions." The subtitle hit even harder. Exclusive documents suggest intentional benefit denials and retaliatory termination of compliance officer. Below were screenshots of redacted emails with every name blurred, except one, G. Thompson, followed by the infamous subject line, Policy Deviation, Legal Risk Concern. The article quoted Kellen's ledger piece but expanded on it, detailing patterns of benefit denials, vanished audit trails, and internal orders to avoid triggering state investigations. They never said criminal, but it was heavily implied. I sat frozen at my dining table as texts flooded in, from former colleagues, old friends, even my sister, who had never cared much about my job. Is this real? Grace? Is this you? You're on the front page of Google News. Dana called 15 minutes later, calm as ever, but with a quiet note of triumph. They're panicking, she said. The SEC has opened a preliminary inquiry. The Office of Employee Benefits is reviewing their last 3 quarters. I didn't smile. Not really, but a deeper feeling settled inside me. A calm, not gloating or revengeful, just cold satisfaction, the kind that comes when you know you were right all along and no one can erase the truth anymore. The real surprise came later that day. A formal letter delivered by courier to my apartment. No signature, but stamped by Ullman's legal firm. Printed on heavy bond paper, as if weight lent respectability, I read it 3 times. The gist: a proposed settlement for $95,000 in exchange for my voluntary silence. No further media involvement or legal action. In other words, shut up and go away. It didn't say I was wrong or refute my claims, it just wanted me quiet. There was even a bold line. This offer is not an admission of wrongdoing and is made solely in the interest of restoring company stability and employee morale. I almost laughed. This wasn't damage control. It was fear. Legal, strategic, reputational fear. They knew what was coming and tried to plug the leak with hush money. I called Dana and read her the letter. Standard tactic, she said. Soft gag order. They're buying time while they assess the damage. What do you recommend? I asked. Without hesitation, she said, You already know the answer. And I did, because the truth was never about money. It was about power, silence, and the kind of rot that hides where no one wants to clean. I thought back to all the years I spent defending Ullman's integrity, in audits, reports, quiet one-on-one meetings with employees terrified they'd lost coverage for a child's therapy or a spouse's cancer treatment. I gave everything to protect that system, believing in it even as it creaked under corporate weight. Now they offered me $95,000 to pretend it never happened. As if bruises could be unbruised, lies unlearned. Later that evening, I got a text from Marcus Taylor, the former auditor Dana had reconnected me with. Saw the news, I'm proud of you. They tried to break you, but you held the line. P.S. Mitchell's stepping down medical leave. Apparently. That gave me pause. Mitchell, the man who smiled through firings, who told me I was too expensive, was suddenly gone. Dana confirmed the next morning. They're calling it a personal health sabbatical, but the board's quietly removing him. He's toxic now. I stared at my ceiling for a long time that night. I didn't feel victorious. Not exactly, but unburdened. They tried to erase me. Now their CEO was disappearing into the same silence they forced on me. As I turned off the light, I thought about the offer still sitting in my desk drawer. Unopened, unsigned. They wanted my silence. But by Friday, I had learned how to speak. Then Dana's email arrived through her secure channel. One line, brief and sterile. The board is open to alternative resolutions. Please propose terms for consideration. They weren't offering me silence anymore. Now they wanted my terms. I sat with that sentence for nearly an hour, staring at it like it was an ancient puzzle 2 months ago. They had tossed me aside like a faulty spreadsheet line, just a costly error to cut. Now the board wanted to resolve things, not because they'd had a change of heart, but because the losses were mounting. The class action had over 100 signatures. 2 federal regulators were circling. Shareholders were furious. The stock had dropped 9% in a week. Mitchell's medical sabbatical had turned into a corporate joke. And there I was, sitting in my apartment, holding all the leverage they never imagined I'd wield. Early on, Dana asked me, "What do you want when this ends?" Back then, I had no answer. Now I did. My counteroffer was typed in sharp 14-point calibri, black and bold. I decline the financial settlement in lieu of payment. I propose appointment to a newly created position, Lead Ethics Supervisor. The role includes full oversight of internal policy drafts, insurance regulations, and benefit approvals, reporting directly to the board, bypassing executive leadership. The appointment will be public and irrevocable for 3 years, with starting compensation of $720 per hour. Their silence lasted 2 days. On the third, Dana received a scanned board memo. Some laughed it off. One called it a publicity stunt. Another questioned my motives, suggesting I aimed to humiliate the company. But one director, Janet Grayson, circled back that evening, requesting a private call. I answered, her tone was clipped but sincere. "We reviewed your terms," she said. "The board understands the optics and necessity. If we appoint you, we expect transparency, integrity, and frankly, damage control." "I'm not here to protect you," I replied. "Sut, I'm here to protect the people you failed." To my surprise, she said, "That's exactly why it must be you." 5 days later, the announcement went public. Olmd appoints Grace Thompson as lead ethics supervisor amid ongoing inquiry. I didn't smile when I saw it trending, but I printed the article and tucked it into a leather folder beside my termination notice. A little symmetry, a little justice. The first day back felt strange. The lobby was unchanged. Marble floors, glass doors. But the air felt different. Stiffer, tighter. Security handed me a new badge, a red tier, they said. Direct board clearance. I nodded, clipped it to my blazer, and walked into the same building that had tossed me out in under 30 minutes. The elevator ride to the top floor dragged longer than I remembered. When the doors opened, I stepped into the new ethics office, a corner suite with a long table, 3 file cabinets, and a city view. It wasn't grand. It just needed to exist. That afternoon, while reviewing my first stack of policy revisions, soaked in legalese and spin, I saw a familiar face step into the elevator on the way down. Harold Langston, senior board member, gray suit, narrow glasses, always a Mitchell loyalist. He didn't speak at first, just glanced at my badge, then the file in my hand. As the doors closed, he cleared his throat quietly and said, "We should have listened to you years ago." I said nothing. Some victories don't need applause. But deep down, I stored those words with all the others. Evidence, confirmation, closure. That night, as I closed the blinds in my apartment, I thought of all the times I'd been told to hush, to stop overreacting, to be less particular, less by the book now. I was the one holding the red pen, and those who once erased me would now answer to me. My new contract was 12 pages. I read every word twice, redlined 3 clauses, and insisted on a handwritten addendum. All policy changes must be reviewed by Grace Thompson prior to executive approval. No exceptions. They signed without comment. That's the thing about power. It shifts quietly. No drumroll, no ceremony. One day, you're walking out with your life in a cardboard box. The next, you're back wearing a badge with platinum clearance, charging $720 an hour. I didn't pick the number for poetry. I picked it to be precise. That was the amount they once called unsustainable. Now it was the price they paid to fix the mess they made without me. My title: Lead Ethics Supervisor, External Oversight Division. No longer an employee, not on payroll. I wasn't part of the machine anymore. I audited it, approved every major policy update, and could veto compliance changes with a single signature. The office was sharp: floor-to-ceiling glass, high-backed leather chair, a discreet wall safe I didn't decorate. No plants, no photos. Just a locked drawer with my termination letter and the old settlement offer. Reminders on my first full day back. I arrived early. The halls were quiet. The energy still off-kilter after recent chaos. Some employees nodded cautiously. A few whispered as I passed. I didn't mind, reputation is loud. At 9:15 a.m., a courier delivered my first review documents, 4 binders, and a slim envelope marked Priority Review, Benefits Realignment. I flipped open the envelope and froze at the second page. Mitchell's name still appeared in the metadata. This was one of the last policy updates he personally signed before stepping down. The document outlined a revised benefits tier with a provision to optimize outpatient mental health coverage via claim realignment. I knew what it meant. I'd seen this tactic before. The same soft fraud they tried to push past me 6 months before firing me, cloaked in neutral language. But I knew better. They thought I'd approve it now that I had a title. I took out my red pen and scrawled across the top, "Rejected in violation." Then I slid it back into the envelope and sent it upstairs. 2 hours later, Janet Grayson emailed me a single line. "We stand by your call. Thank you." No debate, no pushback. That moment, simple as it was, tasted colder and sweeter than any apology they could have given. At lunch, I ate alone in the rooftop cafeteria. Same food, different view. The server smiled, as if he recognized something in me, but couldn't place it. While sipping coffee, I noticed a familiar figure near the terrace doors. Helen, the receptionist who used to greet me every morning when I was just Grace from compliance. She approached slowly, cautiously. "I read the articles," she said quietly. I wanted to say, "I'm glad you're back." I nodded instead. "Me too." She hesitated. "Does it feel different?" she asked, and I paused, considering her question. The winter light shimmered behind the skyline. "Ah, it feels clear," I replied, like standing in a room where the lies have finally left. That afternoon, I signed off on a new code of ethics draft, put in place a permanent third-party audit system, and submitted a quarterly training requirement that made executive participation, including board members, mandatory. No one challenged it. No one dared suggest edits. Funny how quickly something once deemed too expensive becomes essential when the alternative is public collapse. That night, standing in front of the mirror, blazer off and sleeves rolled up, I wasn't victorious or angry, just steady. I thought of Mitchell, of the email that ended my career, and the policy he'd tried to slip through unnoticed. And here I was, holding the seal, controlling the ink. They'd fired me once over $720 a month. Now, they paid me $720 an hour to protect them from themselves, not because they trusted me, but because they knew no one else could, and that was enough. The faces had changed, but the furniture stayed the same. The lobby plants were greener, ambient jazz music played softly to ease tension, and the new receptionist wore the soft pastel blazer HR liked to call approachable brochures on the front desk read, "We hear you, we value you." But beneath the glass, the foundation hadn't shifted as much as it pretended to. New leadership arrived. A COO from a Seattle tech firm, a legal affairs director with impeccable credentials from overseas. They brought the right words: transparency, accountability, reform. Yet, as I reviewed the first 10 policy proposals on my desk that month, I still spotted fingerprints of the old system. Soft loopholes, vague clauses, benefits phrased to make denials seem accidental. I didn't raise my voice. I simply circled what mattered in red, attached a 3-line memo reading, "Non-compliant, needs clarification," and sent it back. Within weeks, they stopped testing the boundaries. Most days, I worked quietly, reading, marking, adjusting. There was something meditative about it, like rebuilding a broken engine with careful precision. No speeches, no press releases, just work. Some staff avoided me at first, uncomfortable or unsure how to approach the woman who'd gone from compliance officer to whistleblower to executive auditor. Maybe they feared a house cleaning, but over time, things softened. I noticed nods in meetings when I made points, younger employees asking questions instead of retreating, and occasionally, someone would slip a printed email onto my desk with a sticky note. "I don't know if this is wrong, but it feels off." Those notes meant more than applause. They meant people were beginning to notice on their own one Thursday afternoon, while reviewing a straightforward proposal for a new wellness reimbursement plan. Someone knocked on my open office door, a young man, no older than 22, with an intern lanyard and an oversized backpack, hands tucked nervously into his sleeves, stepped in. "Hi," he said, voice cracking slightly. "I'm Marcus. I'm shadowing Beth from legal this week. She said I could ask questions if that's okay." I leaned back. "Of course." He hesitated, then asked the question he'd clearly been holding in for days. "Is it true you almost brought the company down?" The room was still. I put down my pen and smiled. Not cold or smug, just a gentle curve that said more than any article could. "No," I replied. "I just made them clean it up." Marcus blinked, then nodded slowly. It wasn't the answer he expected, but one he'd remember that evening. I wandered the floors I hadn't visited in months. The break room still smelled like burnt coffee. The third-floor printer jammed if you didn't hit the tray just right. I watched a new generation of employees typing emails, sipping from company mugs, quietly debating insurance terms. They didn't know the whole story. Not really, just fragments, headlines, rumors. But they were living in a version of the company better than before. Not perfect, but better. Because someone refused to stay silent. On my way back to my office, I passed a familiar, narrow, windowless hallway lined with old framed awards. At the end stood the elevator, where I'd once been escorted out. Badge deactivated mid-ride, cardboard box in hand, I stopped. The elevator dinged open, empty. This time, I didn't step in. Instead, I turned and took the long way back through the heart of the office, past people who now watched me, not with suspicion, but with curiosity, respect, even gratitude, not because I yelled, but because I stayed quietly, without permission. I changed everything. The conference room looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe because I sat at the head of the table now. Maybe because time shrinks even the most intimidating places once fear fades. This was the same room where not long ago I'd been handed my walking papers. Told coldly I was too expensive to keep. No plaque, no handshake, no thanks for 21 years. Now I was back, not as an employee, but as the one who approved every policy before it left this room. The meeting was called to discuss a full overhaul of Ulm's ethics and benefits infrastructure. The fallout demanded visible change, and the board wanted a formal presentation on reforms. Led by me, Janet Grayson sat to my left, legal counsel to my right. Faces I recognized from old newsletters and board memos. Most had never met my eyes before. Today, no one could avoid my gaze. A projector hummed softly as slides displayed the new compliance protocols I authored. Clear, enforceable, unapologetic. When I finished, the room fell silent, not with resistance, but respect. A silence that means no doubt remains. Then the door opened. I heard footsteps before I saw him. Mitchell, hair grayer, suit looser, face thinner. The once confident CEO, who'd approved my removal, now entered as a consulting advisor. Official title only. Really, expendable expert called in when optics matter more than power. He didn't look at me at first. He took a seat near the table's end, away from the board. No papers, no laptop, just a classic notepad and a pen. He never clicked once. Janet was the one who finally spoke. "Mitchell, we appreciate your historical insight into the insurance frameworks, but today's meeting is under Grace Thompson's leadership. She has full oversight authority on all compliance updates." I turned to meet his gaze for the first time in almost a year. He gave a subtle nod, and I returned it. That was all there was. No apologies, no excuses, just a quiet acknowledgement. The power dynamic had shifted, and it wasn't going back. After the meeting ended, I stayed behind to gather my things. Several board members approached to shake my hand. One younger man I didn't recognize smiled and said, "You're the reason I joined the ethics committee. We needed someone like you a decade ago." I thanked him softly as we stood in the hallway, passing the former HR office. I noticed a new nameplate on the door, inside. A young woman was talking to someone who looked anxious, probably new. She reminded me of who I used to be, the version of me that believed doing the right thing was enough protection. I kept walking that evening, sitting at my kitchen counter with a glass of red wine. I opened the drawer where I kept the documents that changed everything: my original termination letter, the first flagged email, the hush money offer, and my signed contract as lead ethics supervisor. Each document carried its own weight and told part of the story. I closed the drawer, knowing I didn't need to revisit them anymore. A week later, a nervous intern named Haley stopped by my office clutching a notebook like it was her lifeline. She asked about reimbursement rules. After I explained, I paused and asked, "How's the team treating you so far?" She smiled shyly. "Honestly, it feels safe here. Everyone says the ethics division really has teeth now." I nodded, a small smile tugging at my mouth. Then I spotted a note on her notebook. "Be the one who speaks up." I didn't ask where she got it. I already knew. At my final meeting of the month, I stood again at the head of that familiar conference table, holding a completed report outlining 12 new safeguards I had implemented. No one questioned it or dared challenge it. I was no longer the woman they could brush aside. I was the one they answered to. As I signed the last page, memories flooded back of every moment they tried to erase me. The firing, the silence, the empty elevator ride. "Quietly," I said, almost to the empty chair Mitchell once occupied. "They erased me over $720 a month. Now they pay me 10 times that to make sure no one ever gets erased again."